everyone listening, your products, your services, your ideas, the things you talk about in speeches, you just don't know where they're going to go into the world and the impact that they're going to have on people. It could be huge. You might have no idea. What is ordinary to you may be extraordinary to your marketplace if they only knew about it. And I promise you, there are things, whether you're a giant, I work with multi-billion-dollar companies and I work with individuals. And I promise you that often, like, there is gold just lying on the ground.
It's not often that you get to meet someone of your caliber that's done so much incredible work in helping people really, really stand out in such a noisy, crowded world. I'm curious, before we jump into the tactics and a lot of the strategies you use to deploy that to help the audience, how did you even find yourself into this field? Because obviously you're a funny guy, you enjoy life, you enjoy relationships and people, and so how'd you kind of find your way into helping people actually discover their core?
Oh, yeah. So I was in the book industry. I was the director of sales for special projects for the third largest book wholesaler in the world. We would buy millions of dollars worth of books from publishers like Random House and Simon & Schuster and Doubleday. And then we'd sell them to independent bookshops and chain bookstores. And I helped them sell over $1 billion worth of books.
Not too shabby.
Right, exactly. Which is hard to do because back then books were very, very cheap. A hardcover was like $19, so it's very hard to do. And so what I did all day essentially was phone sales. But I had accounts. I wasn't cold calling. But, it was phone sales. And essentially, I would see every single book that was ever released, every book, and I had to size it up quickly about what it is that was important about it and why it might sell or it wouldn't sell, or what had happened in the world that had changed since the book was first published and so forth. I had to make all these calculations, and then I had to get on the phone in real time and pitch it. Yeah. And so I construed that over the decade plus that I did that job, that I did over 25,000 live pitches for money that ended up helping total to over $1 billion type of thing with the teams I led and so forth. And so I had reached the heights of what I could reach there. I couldn't go any higher. And so I left, and I essentially became a consultant, and I would look at people's businesses or their personal brands as if it were a book.
Nice.
Whether they were writing a book or not. Like, in other words, this is metaphorical. I would say, here's the quote unquote book Stephen has written with his life. Here's what the main idea is. What are the ancillary ideas? What are the satellite ideas? What are the stories he likes to tell about things? What are some of the lessons from some of the stories he may not be seeing? What's obvious that he's not seeing, and so forth? What if we moved an ancillary idea or a smaller idea up to the fore, or we put together two ideas that hadn't gone there before, and we moved that to the fore? Would it be a better selling book? Yeah. And now how would I teach him to go about pitching that book to people? Yeah. And that's all I did. And I've ended up working at the highest levels for the biggest companies you've ever seen, and for the top individuals. And I really just do the same thing. It's essentially, what here is so cool that people would go nuts to hear it. Like, it's just so important. And now how do you evangelize around that idea? What are the stories? Not in a manipulative way, but like, what is it that you can fall in love with? And how do you tell stories about that thing you love and get other people to tell stories about it? Because I love it too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, that's so cool. And I love that. It's interesting that, I remember it was probably maybe, it might have been 10 years ago. I'm dating myself and my comment I'm about to make. And I stumbled across the Start With Why video on YouTube. I think Simon had just done it about that time. I think it was a TEDx style talk. I believe the one that's really kind of
it was TEDx.
And it exploded. And then, as I'm getting to know more about your career and kind of like getting to know more about you and understanding more about what you did, and then figuring out, okay, this guy actually helped Simon understand the why behind Start With Why. like, which I think is which is a pretty incredible thing. What do you think is standing in the way so many times of people really getting to that innovative concept, that innovative idea? What are the 2 or 3 things that really kind of like stumble people up?
So I would say, for one thing, that um often uh they they're looking at their lives or at their work or at their business, that there are obvious things that are in front of them that are important that they're not giving heed to.
Okay.
That if they just saw their lives in a much more like if they drain stuff of meaning almost, and they looked at certain parts of their lives in new ways, interesting ideas would jump out at them. So that's for what. And by the way, I can tell you a quick story about this. If it's a story I often tell in my keynotes, but I love the story and it illustrates what it is I mean. So over 100 years ago, there was a famous advertising man named Claude Hopkins. And Claude used to do the advertising for Wrigley's gum and so forth. And Claude Hopkins got a call from the Schlitz Brewery, the head of the Schlitz Brewery. And the guy from Schlitz said, "Mr. Hopkins, there are 8 big breweries in the United States. And on that list of 8, we're number 8. We're in last place. We need your help." Claude Hopkins, "I'm positive I can help you. I'm certain. In order to help you, I'm going to have to take a tour of the Schlitz Brewery." And the guy from Schlitz said, "Mr. Hopkins, you're not going to find anything if you take the tour. But if it's necessary, just come here and we'll give you the tour." And what he did, he went there from Chicago till Milwaukee, and they gave him a tour of the Schlitz Brewery, and what he saw astonished him. The first thing they showed him was an artesian well 3,000 feet deep. The reason why they went that deep is that they wanted to make a pure beer, and they thought the purest water on earth was that deep. And by the way, artesian well meant that the water was spewing out like a geyser from the earth. Pure water. And like Hopkins freaking out. And then they showed him a machine that triple steam cleaned every bottle before they poured the Schlitz beer into it. Triple steam cleaned. It would go through over and over again. Then they showed him under lock and key, underground in a vault. It was what they called a single mother yeast cell. It had taken Schlitz brewers and scientists 1,017 experiments to create the single mother yeast cell. This essentially had the exact flavor that every bottle of Schlitz that ever had been made tasted like this thing. And every bottle of Schlitz that would be. This was the master,
it's like the master recipe and all the things
that's exactly, it was a physical thing. And like Hopkins was freaking out. He was saying, "Oh my God, this place is a wonderland. Why aren't you telling people about these wonders?" And the guy from Schlitz said, "This place is not a wonderland. These are no wonders. I told you wouldn't understand. This is how you brew beer at scale." Everyone listening to this should listen very closely to what I'm about to say. This is how you brew beer at scale. This is how we brew beer at scale. And this is how every one of our 7 other competitors brews beer at scales. We do the things identically. There's no difference. So what we're doing here is nothing special. What we're doing is very ordinary. And Claude Hopkins said, "Yes, but the public doesn't know that."
Wow.
And so Hopkins proceeded to write a series of advertisements detailing every single thing he saw, the artesian well, the triple steam cleaning bottles, 1,017 experiments. And Schlitz in less than a year went from being in last place to being tied at least for number 1.
Let's go.
So to me, the moral of that story is what is ordinary to you may be extraordinary to your marketplace if they only knew about it. And I promise you, there are things, whether you're a giant, I work with multi-billion-dollar companies and I work with individuals. And I promise you that often, like, there is gold just lying on the ground. People are just walking right over. So that's one thing. You said, what's the problem? People are ignoring the gold that's lying on the ground uncovered. A second thing that they're ignoring is, and this is part of the same thing, part of the same idea. But since you asked me such a beautiful question that no one ever asked me, I wasn't prepared, but I'll tell you what's coming to mind, is that people this is a similar answer. They forget what it was like to first be doing the work that they do and experiencing the work they do. Like they become inured to it, they become callous. Yeah. And so another way to access that kind of freshness is to think about every single way that your work surprises people. Wow. So in other words, when you're speaking to clients or so, what do they get surprised at? What do they laugh at? What do they get shocked at? What do they get angry at? Or also, by the way, in doing the work you do, what do you get surprised at? Yeah. Or what did you get surprised at first? So in surprises, because surprises are moments where expectations are defeated. We thought everything was going this way and suddenly it went a different way. Yeah. So there are anomalies. So where anomalies are, there was an AI scientist named Roger Schank who said anomalies are where the action's at. You need to look for the anomalous things, the surprising things, the things that like what? Yeah. And there's always something interesting there. A final thing, because you said 2 or 3 things, so I'm greedily going to take 3.
Let's go.
Yeah, is that there's organic meaning to who you are. So there's obvious things that you're ignoring. There are surprises that you've become inured to that you're not seeing. And your differentiation may be there. It may be part of who you are already. Yeah. But sometimes you need to create a new point of differentiation for what it is you're doing. And I often find organizations think, like, well, either we have to create differentiation from what already is, otherwise it's phony differentiation. Yeah. And I would argue with you that everything that you've been that you want to create differentiation from was once new. Yeah. Like it's just a time lapse thing. If you look at today, at the present, you can easily create something brand new to differentiate around. And then in the future, that will be the old thing. Yeah. Does that make sense?
No, I love all of that. In fact, I was just thinking, I think it's why your work is so powerful and so important, and why folks should consider working with you. You need that outside perspective. I always say that a lot of times there's a framework that I use that I funnel business and life through. Right. And it's a decisional, I can use it as a decisional framework. It's super simple. It's a small acronym, 4 letters. G stands for gain perspective. Right. So it's looking for the anomalies. It's looking for the surprises. It's looking for the things that are impeding progress or that can elevate progress or whatever. Right. So it's trying to look at things from as many different angles as possible. And one of those angles, oftentimes I tell people, is an outside source. An outside third-party opinion that's not close to you or your work or anything that can come and say, well, this is what I got from it. And every time I've done that exercise, even with my own stuff, my own businesses, whether it's Unstoppable Startup, whether it's helping thought leaders, it doesn't matter. Every single time I get a surprise from them that I wasn't expecting. Like their takeaway was totally different than what I was positioning for, if that makes any sense. And the R stands for remove roadblocks. Right. So look for the things that are roadblocks or obstacles or kind of in the way, so to speak. And then, start looking for ways to, remove the roadblocks. The O is organize a plan and the W is work the plan. So grow. Right. So gain perspective, remove roadblocks, organize a plan, work the plan. And when I do that with folks, all it is a tool to do exactly kind of the things that you just described. As you were describing, I was like, this is why this process has been so helpful for people, because it's helping them find these different differentiating factors, finding these different surprises, and like looking at it from a whole different angle. I don't know. It was just a unique epiphany, if you will, because in the thought leadership world, when you and I both serve awesome thought leaders with great messages and stuff like that, you are obviously helping them really craft kind of the core message and kind of really what they should be known for in many respects. And I'll tell you, as a
absolute
thought leader, if you want to call it that, for the last decade, basically, in the only last 2 years, have we started getting a lot of extra traction. And it's because I got clearer and clearer and clearer and clearer. I wouldn't even say we're 100% clear yet. Right. But as you get clearer, it becomes easier to broadcast a wider message. In my thought leadership world, One of the things that I didn't realize was so prevalent was most thought leaders that have massive messages that the world actually needs to hear don't actually know how to grow and operate and scale a business. They're really good at the artistry, if you will, of the idea and the concept. And as someone who has built and now sold and exited a business, I realized that if I come alongside of them and help them understand the frameworks and the parts and the pieces and the tools, I can help them monetize their brand and then help them go from monetization to then reinforcement of their brand with people like yourself and other assets to help them kind of do something amazing. The reason I say all that is because the number one phase that we do when we start working with people, period, is what we call data mining. Like we meet with data mining. We want to meet with them. We want to get to know them. We want to know how their mom is, how their dad is, like where the dog, poops in like we want to know as much information about them as humanly possible in an effort to serve them the best way humanly possible. And I know you do that with like excellence, which I love. One of the things I heard you say on another podcast that I really appreciated was, and I might say this a little bit wrong, but you'll understand the concept, is the ability or the desire or the importance of creating an aspirational sales message. So talk to us a little about the importance of shaping that message, kind of what that entails, because I find that people try to sell a product, good, or service without necessarily telling the person they're trying to sell it to why it's so beneficial to them or why they need it, kind of thing.
Yeah. People, we tend to get lost in the features of what it is that we do.
Mm-hmm.
And talking about the features of something to me can be really important. Like that's how the work gets done. That shows that what you're doing, that you're not just selling people a bill of goods, that you're just not making sense. So people who get stuck, and this happens constantly.
Yeah.
In sales literature, it doesn't.
Yeah.
Like in sales literature, it seems like no one does this.
It's marketing 1960s 101.
Right. I'm telling you, I've worked with thousands of people. It is the most common thing in the world. And I know that when I'm looking at a service where I'm not expert in, I don't really want to know too much about how they're going to do it. I just want to know what it is that's going to happen at the end and why and how I'm going to benefit from it. And I need to trust that they know how to do that. But
so is that kind of like a transcendent result?
Yeah. Explain what you mean by transcendent.
Well, I call it the to from category. So you're transcending one destination to another destination. So if you're in pain now, but yet this is going to promise pleasure, I'm using, 2 P's just for fun because my brain thinks in fortune cookie. There's a destination. So if I'm working with someone in problem mode, I need to be able to communicate to them the transcendent to the pleasure mode, so to speak.
Right. That's interesting. I tend to refer to transcendent is too fancy for me. I appreciate that. I love what you said. But transformation, which is really just a term from chemistry, is really just like you transform one liquid to another. So I sometimes their differentiation suffers because we don't know what the beginning state was. So you need to let people know, here's what the beginning state looks like. You're in this situation, you feel this way, like here's the situation. And now here's what people have, here's what they've transformed into, or here's what the business is transformed into. So to me, it's just very important to have the before and after.
Yeah, 100%.
Because otherwise, if you don't have the before, then people don't know how far the journey was to get to the after.
Yeah.
Right? Like if someone wanted $1 million, it's like, well, if you start with 999,000, like it's hard to get to. So you need to know where you're starting from. But you talked about a transcendent result, and it's you said I had said something on a previous podcast I don't remember what that was, but the idea of you need to talk about what the state is that your work is going, that like what we're driving towards.
Yeah.
And they'll want to be very careful that you don't oversell.
Yeah.
That you don't become like a flim flam artist or something.
Yeah.
I'm not saying anyone listening to this would be, but I'm always very cautious about like what's the vision that we're going after, that's going to draw. I mean, it's the idea of the moonshot. The interesting thing about the moonshot vision and imagery was we got there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, like, what's a place that we can aspire to, that we can grow to, that we can actually get to?
Yeah.
I actually see people have visions sometimes that they sell people on, and they're places that you can't really ever get to.
Yeah.
So I'm that cool.
Well,
like,
I think you can also, if you use the moon example,
Yes.
like it's also a vision that you can unify people around.
That's right.
But it's not a vision you're now carrying on your own or an aspiration. Now it's
right.
Yeah, I love that.
Beautifully put. That's right. Thank you.
I love that. I want to pivot back to personal branding for just a second. There was a study done, I don't know, it might have been Brand Builders Group's good friend of mine, Rory and AJ Baden. They're out of Nashville, Tennessee. Love those folks.
Sure, they're great.
Yeah. They did a study probably about maybe 2 years ago. And in the study, they hired an outside agency to do the study, do a complete, workup analysis of personal branding, where it's headed, why it's important, who needs it, who doesn't need it, all this kind of stuff. And one of the things that they discovered in that is that people are 100 times more likely to actually get work done from a doctor, regardless of what it is, a physician, if that physician had a relative personal brand, or an attorney. It's almost like the personal brand in many respects is now leading the businesses, where, back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, it was the businesses that had, figureheads, but that weren't really talked about and discussed. So if you look at the contrast of the two, it seems to me that it's never been more important now to get super clear on this differentiating idea, concept, or orchestration of the personal brand.
Right. In the past, in the 40s, 50s, 60s, they didn't play up the person, they played up the corporation. They elevated the organization to like kind of cult status. And people know, though, now that businesses and organizations, I like to say that that a business is really just paperwork. Like it's in your computer, in your filing
the process,
in the lawyers. It's a bunch of papers that are signed. It's bringing people together to get things done that they couldn't have done on their own. So it's always and yes, there are processes involved and things like that. But in the end, the organization is more just the legal entity, and it's the people who actually make the things happen. And people understand that that's the case, that a great leader can help bring an organization to the fore or so. Like, well, with your work, because I know you very successfully sold a business. How did you go about using your personal brand as? Yeah,
so I was actually kind of fortunate in that long before that was transpiring, I was at a speaking event, got invited to speak. People wanted to hear more. I then, around 2014, released my first book, which is a bit more of a memoir of my journey from homelessness to kind of where I was at the time. And then from there, we discovered that for some reason, the audience began gravitating towards me to get questions answered regarding startups and businesses and stuff like that, life mastery, mindset, overcoming limiting beliefs and stuff like that. So, I think it happened more for me organically. It wasn't less unintentional. I did, however, have aspirational brands, personal brands that I aspire to, in some ways, be like or emulate to some degree. People that I respected in the marketplace. I just thought they were wonderful. Simon was actually one of those at the time. This is like close to 10 years ago. Because his idea was so different than anything else anybody had ever seen before, right?
Yeah.
And I think at that time, then you go on the search for this idea. What is this unique? Because there's lots of people that could talk about businesses and startups. There's while it's very difficult to do to start a company from literally the trash piles of a construction site and have an almost 9-figure business at the end of it. And there's a lot to do there. There are a lot of entrepreneurs that have started with nothing and built amazing businesses. So that's not the skill. That's not the topic. What's the topic? Kind of thing. And start shaping that. I say all that to say that my personal brand journey was a bit more organic and less intentional. But over the last 5 years, it's been a lot more intentional. It's been a lot more, okay, what type of content is uniquely congruent with who I am as a person? How does that congruency align with an audience that could easily be equally as congruent with me? So there's an actual benefit to the audience that's watching and listening. It's why we're so selective, when we bring people on the show like yourself that we know that can feed the audience with new wisdom and new knowledge to help them kind of move the needle a little bit. So I've kind of always lived from the inside out in the last several years. It's like, okay, this is what's inside of me. How can I broadcast this in such a way that's beneficial to the world at large? Again, you find your audience by sharing your message. You don't share your message and then find your audience. Like you have to get out there and start just sharing and sharing your ideas, right? So for me, the personal brand journey became necessary. I actually was one of the people that used to fight it. So I had an original organization that was called the Journey Principles Institute, which was named after my first book, The Journey Principles. And I fought the personal brand thing for a really long time because I didn't want to be a figurehead. I didn't want to be seen as, because you and I know this as people that have built and shaped businesses. There are a lot of people that go into building a business. And I always felt guilty a little bit about being the figurehead or getting to win all the credibility and all the hurrah, when I know there were so many people working behind the scenes. So I focused on the organization. That ultimately
100%.
Yeah. And ultimately that never really took root until I did take 3 steps forward and say, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do it with the most humble heart I know how to do, and to give reference to the team and stuff as much as I can. But the idea is, I did realize, and Rory Vaden helped me realize this actually. I was the one coming up with the ideas. Like, I'm a person of faith, so I believe in God, and God, shares revelation or whatever. And as a result, it's like I'm sketching out schematics and I'm writing, quotes. And the one thing that we have no shortage of is content. I'm constantly thinking, constantly creating, and so then it just became osmosis. So what I've discovered is some of the most thought-provoking thought leaders on the planet right now have done the work that you are saying that they need to do, which is finding out what that idea is. Marie Forleo was everything is figure outable, right? So the core message is you could figure it out, and that is where I think the meat and potatoes are. So it's a long-winded answer to say that I was organic, but I also value the people that have come alongside of me, like yourself, to help me understand clarity, getting super clear, because there's a big, sexy idea out there for everybody, I believe. And it takes a guide to find it, my personal opinion.
Well, beautifully put, and interesting from what you said. The more successful your organization is, or the more kind of cutting edge all your wisdom needs to be, and I say that, like, for instance, Gary Vaynerchuk, who I adore, like I love Gary's stuff or whatnot. Gary can put out an idea. We're talking about personal brands, and ideas. Gary can put out an idea that's common sense, and it'll have thousands and thousands of likes.
Yeah.
And so when I say, this is not knocking it whatsoever, I'm just saying it's that the oomph of the idea comes from Gary's life and what he's demonstrated in building the wine store from 2 million to 20 million, from starting VaynerMedia, from doing, all these other ventures he does and whatnot. So it's who he is what provides the electricity.
Yeah.
And so the less known you are, the more the idea itself has to be electric on its own.
Yeah. 100%.
Until people get to know you. So it really needs to be a big, sexy idea, because it goes out ahead of you and it acts as an emissary and a missionary for you out in the world. And then you become connected to that and become bigger. Yeah. But if the personal brand is elevated, like if you've really done big things, after a while, the lifting is not as hard.
100%. Well, and that's 100% true. I think the other flip side of that is, myself and other people that have done some really nice things in life with a lot of work and a lot of sacrifice. I'm not going to downplay that a bit in the world. Yeah. Yes, it's easier because you have the credibility, but in some cases it's more difficult because what we talked about at the beginning of the show, which is obviously you're so close to it. You don't know what you don't know. I was in some of these meetings I've been in recently with clients and whatnot. I'm just being me. I'm just sharing from experience, or, I'm on a whiteboard drawing stuff out to help them figure out their thing. And, and they're just, it's funny because they sit back and they just go, not in a way of, pleasant surprise, but not overwhelming because I think some ideas can be so big that the person feels overwhelmed on the other side. How will I ever implement that kind of thing? This is more along the lines of, this is the step-by-step process, lay out 10 steps. And they were like, you guys see the light bulb? I was like, that makes total sense. Why haven't I done that already? Kind of thing.
Right. Well, related to what you just said, a very big deal to me is, unless if you're selling something big or you're trying to make a big idea come across, people will always hesitate because they're not sure that idea is going to work with them.
Yeah.
So the biggest deals that I have ever been involved in or whatnot, we've always, I won't say always, that's wrong, but many times it's, you want to show the person that things will work with their stuff.
Yeah.
So it's always going in and saying, what's your situation? And saying, here's what that looks like for you. Like, not just in an aspirational way, here's some things you should be doing.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, it's very common, like for me in a sales meeting or so, I might say, look, whether you hire me or not, what I'm going to tell you is something that I really think you should be doing. And I mean that sincerely. Yeah. And I'll give them like real ideas.
That's free value.
That's right. Well, but to me, because I want that, like I've always been very big on sampling.
Yeah.
Like you actually need to sample the thing itself. Mm-hmm. And the closer you can get to sampling the actual thing itself without some intermediary standing in the way. Mm-hmm. Like it's one thing to have a blog post about something or a video about something or whatnot. All that stuff is great. But the closer you can show me what it looks like exactly with my material and with who I am, that's when I'll get really excited about working with you. That's when all the barriers drop.
Yeah.
Like I just find that. And I'm saying this almost as if it's like some kind of transactional technique. I don't look at it that way. I just look at it as kindness.
Yeah.
I just look at it as
service. Yeah.
As service. That's right. Yeah. There was a CEO about 15 years ago. I can't remember who said it, of a smaller company, but the person said, your marketing should be so good that it's confused with service.
Nice.
That people should because that's what it is, that you're going out and you're just, it's marketing, but you're genuinely helping people.
Yeah. Well, people don't want to be sold. They have no problems being served.
That's right. That's a beautiful way to put it.
Yeah.
So me, to anyone listening, like the more you can work with people's real stuff and help create a transformation right then and there where you are, it doesn't mean you have to give away the store.
Yeah.
But like it's doing good in the world and more likely to have people trust you and want to work with you and want to recommend people with you. But the more distant you stand, at least with me, the more it's, I don't know. I'm sure it worked for your friends. I don't know it's going to work for me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, clearly your clientele list and the people you've helped, get their big ideas has gone out to substantially benefit their careers.
Yeah.
We just you continue using Simon as an example. Start with why, the message, the video, the core concept. To this day, is still one of the most transformational concepts. I was doing a speaking event in Dallas just a few days ago for an industry that I was connected to back in the day when I was still owning the other business, and it's a siding manufacturer, but it's a multi-billion-dollar business, and they were having their national sales meeting. And a number of years ago, the guy that brought me in to speak sat me. We hadn't caught up in probably 5 or 6 years, and we're sitting there talking, right? And he's like, "Do you remember, like almost like 10 years ago, I came to your office and I was trying to figure out what the secret sauce is because secret sauce from how we operated our business and whatnot." And he was like, "Yeah." I was like, "I remember that." He goes, "Do you remember this one time that I was really trying to understand and you were trying to help me understand it, and you turned around a video and you played it of Simon Sinek of Start to Why? That conversation just happened 2 days ago. Just happened 2 days ago." And then he went on to say, he goes, "I want you to know that I played that for my sons, and my sons who were struggling at the time found their purpose and their passion and are now our top producers at the different companies they work at."
Oh, wow.
Because of that. So I guess what I'm getting at is the cool thing about an idea is it's infinite. An idea is infinite. Right? An idea that's worthy of being heard or shared or implied, or it has its own eternity built around it.
You beautifully put. You don't know where your ideas, like they can be days from now, weeks from now, years from now.
Yeah.
They can be on other continents. They can be used in ways that you never realized.
Yeah.
Very quick story. I had co-written a book many years ago with Joel Bauer, who the Wall Street Journal Online called the chairman of the board of corporate trade show rainmaking. Like Joel would do these at trade shows. Joel. Oh, okay. So Joel, anyway, this was a book on how to persuade, but how to persuade in a big and entertaining way. And both Joel and I have backgrounds as magicians. I create magic. So there's some magic in the book and so forth. We call these things transformation mechanisms that change the reality. Anyway, but it's a business book with magic tricks in it and whatnot. Here's why I'm saying all this stuff. I still remember that we once got an email from a guy saying, "I want to thank you for writing your book, How to Persuade People Who Don't Want to Be Persuaded. I run groups for people who are suicidal."
Wow.
That they've tried. And he said, the thing about people who are suicidal is, as you can just imagine, they're profoundly depressed and they are very self-focused. They're not like open out into the world a lot. They're just shut down.
Yeah.
And he said, so what I did was I read your book and I used some of your transformation mechanisms to them. Essentially, they're tricks with a moral with them. And I use them and suddenly they open up. I get their attention and it allows us to have meaningful conversations. It allows us to take so like this idea that like I'm not saying this for self-praise. It's this idea of like, I did not write that book with the idea that it was going to help people who had suicidal tendencies. Like, you just don't know. Everyone listening, your products, your services, your ideas, the things you talk about in speeches, you just don't know where they're going to go into the world and the impact that they're going to have on people. It could be huge. You might have no idea. You could be saving someone's life with your work, and you may never even realize it.
Yeah. Well, I think that's, as we're wrapping up the show, I think that's one of the things I'd like for the audience to kind of sit with. Whether they're watching us talk or, or they're listening to the audio version, is this core concept. This is why it's important to do the work, to discover the idea, so the idea can be shared, because you don't know how far it'll go. And in a roundabout way, not putting in the work, not taking the steps, not discovering what that is, or even taking the steps in general to share an idea, you're actually, in theory, based on what we just discussed, you may be making, it's not even making less of an impact. It's actually not making the impact that you actually need to make to better the life of someone else, because of the way that an idea shapes the world. The entire world is based on ideas.
That's right. You may be holding on to an idea that is going to alter the planet for the better. And I mean this sincerely.
100%.
I've had lots of these things. You may be holding on to something, and just for some reason, you don't want to talk about it. You don't want to appear brash or whatnot. You're holding on to it. And like that might be a big mistake for humanity.
Yeah. No, man. So good. Well, I know we're at the tail end of the show, but I wanted to, a couple of things. Where can somebody learn more about you and maybe try to work with you? Also, we didn't get a chance to talk about your amazing speaking, but you're a very gifted and talented speaker. And for those audience, my audience does events and stuff like that. So I highly recommend you in both categories. Where can somebody find out more about you?
Yeah. So my website is levyinnovation.com, Levy, and then the word innovation. No S at the end. I'm only capable of one innovation. So levyinnovation.com. Yeah, right. Exactly. You can also find me on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn or so. And as far as thank you so much, my speaking goes, I speak on creating big, sexy ideas and how to talk about your business so that people care. Yeah. Like, you've got to be able to talk about things so that people give a damn about them. Like, otherwise, there's no reason to do it.
That's right. Amen to that. Well, Mark, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show, dude. Anything we can do to serve you, we're happy to do it. You've been an absolute blessing to the audience. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, take care. I hope you liked that video. And if you did, make sure you check out this next video right here.
You have the ability to control your mind. Yeah. And that is like mind blowing for some people. Like, they just don't get that. You don't have to keep the thought that pops into your mind, and you have the ability to choose something different that's going to then make you feel a different way and take action.